Are EMFs harming your sleep? Navigating the EMF maze, Bluetooth earbuds, lots of stuff on 5G, and how worried do we need to be about electromagnetic fields? Because most of us aren't really, and as you listen to this, your phone might be in your pocket. So today we're looking at EMFs. Hi, I'm Tony. I'm an author, presenter at Sky Sports, and years ago I went to the jungle and got ill. Very ill. So this is my podcast adventure to find more energy. It's packed with biohacking, science, health tech, supplements, and some of the most well-known experts on the planet.
This is something I spent 4 months of my life doing with electrodes glued to my head so that you can do a lifetime worth of meditation.
Decide what you don't give a fuck about, which is something you don't care about.
Some of it gets quite out there.
I had some stem cells sent up to my house that I had stored, and then I injected myself with mannitol.
And we even hack hangovers.
Alcohol is poisonous. So is water and oxygen in the wrong dosage.
So that's my podcast, Zestology. Live life with energy, vitality, and motivation. Yes, hello again, and big news, I am back in the UK. I know I've been talking a lot about being in Thailand for the last few months on Zestology. I'll record a separate personal update podcast in the next few weeks, but I'm a bit cold. It's not quite as warm and it's not quite as sunny, but apart from that, I'm doing all right, and so are we all. Thank you for all your messages of support and slight jealousy over the last few months. And yeah, it's good to be back, and it's nice to be back in my bedroom recording this podcast. And today, the complex world of electromagnetic fields and what they are doing to your health with Nicolas Pineault, author of the Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMFs. I was looking forward to this podcast anyway, and it was such a pleasure talking to such an expert. Today, we explore the potential risks associated with everyday technologies. Once you listen to this podcast, you won't be putting your phone in your pocket anymore. We discuss practical solutions to reducing your exposure to EMFs without sacrificing modern conveniences. And we shed light on the safety of Bluetooth earbuds. Shall I give you a disclaimer now? Take the AirPods out. We also look at the worst nighttime EMF habit. I can't believe this. So many people do this at night, and it is so bad for you. Well, I mean, I think it is. And you'll find out about that. And me and Nicolas just got on really well. So here he is, informed decisions about your tech usage, coming up with Nicolas Pineault on Zestology. Nicolas, we're on. How are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
Yeah, so good. And have been looking forward to talking to you so much. I've got a long list of questions for you. But first, perhaps you could introduce yourself to people who might not know about you and your work and what you do.
Sure. My name is Nicolas Pineault. I'm just a French-Canadian guy from Montreal who's been writing about health for almost 15 years now. I started writing about nutrition because I really found it fascinating, and I was doing some, amateur bodybuilding at the time. It was in 2008, 2009. And I started just writing online in French. Eventually, I switched to English because I figured that maybe this is what I want to do in life. I have a background in communications. So out of uni, I started writing about health. And this is the kind of topic that drove me. So I didn't feel like work. So I kind of found my passion through writing online and reporting on, a lot of controversial topics, whether it's, how to pick the right foods at the grocery store. And then I came across the work of journalists that wrote about the olive oil scandal, to the effect that most olive oil sold in the US to this day still are kind of cut with vegetable oils and all sorts of even legal troubles that people got into. And there's an entire mafia in Italy and other countries that sell forfeit or fake olive oils throughout Europe. There's an entire cartel, and you would I mean, this is the kind of stuff in like a spy movie, but around olive oil. But I was fascinated because in the end, for the consumer, it meant that you're trying to pick the right oil and you're like, okay, this is healthy, and you're not sure what you're getting. So for me, it kind of made me mad because people are trying their best to be healthy, but it becomes so complicated. You got to have like a PhD and a computer to Google things around when you're at a grocery store, which is nonsensical. And it led me to, one thing led to another. I published ebooks, I published different information. I did some interviews in those years. And then eventually in 2016, I was originally supposed to write about cancer because my mom had about 3 or 4 months of fighting with cancer at the beginning of the year in 2016. It kind of inspired me to, let's talk about carcinogens, because people need to know how to minimize their risks. It's not like you can make yourself invincible or guaranteed to never develop cancer, but there are things you can avoid, and we know about those. So I started writing this. It was called Cancer Clarity, and I wanted to talk about alternative treatments and integrative treatments, and the regular route, and how to use other modalities. So I got into alternative health a lot. And then eventually I stumbled upon a carcinogen or possible carcinogen called the cell phone radiation. And it really shocked me because, it had been maybe since a few years prior, maybe 2015, I did hear about cell phones, Wi-Fi, and I wasn't convinced myself. I don't know why exactly. I kind of took it not that seriously. And there's a lot of I cannot say fringe, but there's a lot of conflicting and random information on the internet about EMFs, electromagnetic fields, and I was not convinced myself. But eventually, reading very credible books such as the work of Dr. Martin Blank with Overpowered, and then eventually reading every book on the topic available on Amazon and on the internet, eventually I became convinced, my God, this is such a big issue because most carcinogens, you're exposed to them if you pick a food, or maybe if you live in a certain location and they use pesticides. And some of them, like, glyphosate, that is now a class 2A carcinogen, can be found everywhere. The contamination is everywhere. But in the case of cell phones, it's pretty much everywhere also. So it really made me realize that not only is it everywhere, but we're exposing ourselves through devices that we're addicted to and handing those devices to kids. And then I realized, my God, this is huge. This is, in a sense, more dangerous or more concerning than many pesticides and other environmental toxins that on an everyday basis, I was already trying to avoid or reduce as best as I can, trying to eat organic and avoid BPA. And for what it's worth, turns out there's other BPs in there that are equally bad, but we're all trying our best. But when it comes to EMFs, I was clueless. I did not know what to do about it. And it led me to writing my book, The Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMFs. And I tried to make it light and use humor and kind of use a different style. Just something is a style that resonates with me because I have fun writing it, and I'm not a PhD, I'm not a researcher, I'm a citizen journalist. So I try to do my best, but I try to write in a way that is very simple for people so that they can grasp the topic and actually go through it and not want to, put the book down and forget about it. So a lot of people told me your book successfully convinced me. And that's kind of what I was trying to achieve is, okay, what can be a page turner so much that people actually learn information, and then unfortunately for them, for their health, they cannot unlearn it, and it stays in their mind, and they say, okay, maybe I got to do these changes because there's a lot of uncertainty around EMFs, but what we already know is concerning enough for us to just make simple changes to minimize our exposure.
Yeah, and I guess since you brought it out, the problem has only got worse, right?
Since that time, yes, I guess this is what made me stay on the topic. I never stayed on the topic for so long. Usually I was, learning new things, a bit hyperactive, meditation, healthy foods, and I got into essential oils and this and that. I've been solely on EMFs full time since 2017, 2018, after I wrote my book. And it's really when that same year, I published my book on Amazon in November. And I think that in August, a little bit before my book was officially published, I went to a health event. 350 of the world's, at least the US and even internationally as well, some of the world's foremost experts in functional medicine and, holistic health. Everyone was on their phone. Almost no one knew about EMFs. And the levels of EMFs I measured at the conference were among the highest readings I took anywhere. And I was using in those days my meter a lot to kind of quantify environments, Montreal, Dallas. And when I travel, I try to look at background levels, like what is the electro pollution, so to speak, here. But at this conference, it was so electro polluted, and these practitioners were holistically minded, and yet they were missing the fact that this is a new pollutant that is introduced in the environment. So I was invited to do a short keynote of 5 minutes, and I talked on 5G, and 5G, the rollout hadn't even started yet. It was kind of a projected technology. And I said, we've got a big issue here, because this will increase the amount of cell towers we're exposed to. And there are already big concerns. And I was so surprised at the feedback. It was almost mind blowing for me, because again, I'm just a guy from Montreal. I arrive at a health conference and I say, look, these are not my findings. These are the findings of international scientists. They've been trying to warn the UN, the WHO, the governments for years, for decades. The concerns started way before that, but the bulk of the concerns since the early 2000s has been appeal after appeal after appeal by groups of sometimes hundreds of scientists that are active in this field. Independent scientists, that is, because if you take the industry folks that are publishing for military or governments or the industry, there's a lot of no findings research. But the question can be asked, what is the bias here? And of course, there's a major bias towards no effect when the funding comes from people who benefit from the technologies and would benefit from us keeping the safety limits so high. So I was overwhelmed by the response. It was very positive, and I ended up starting to organize a course for health practitioners based on the info of other health practitioners, because this is what I do. I publish information. I try to take information from other people, package it in a way that is understandable, and then try to have other people educated about it. So we educated about more than 1,000 health practitioners, and then because I wanted to go there, it was kind of where the response was. The public was not initially ready yet, but a lot of practitioners were. And starting at that point, I just continued the mission and continued interviewing scientists and learning. And I learned so much in the last years. It's crazy. It's just there's so much happening in EMFs. And even if the levels are getting worse with 5G and satellites and whatnot, the response is getting better and better from the public, from politicians, regulators, and scientists. I think they're encouraged. I really feel like the movement is kind of shifting right now, and there's a lot of big wins on the legal front also. So it's encouraging. That's why I stay in this field. But there's still so much to learn also, and many people are just so thankful that they do. And there's still, I don't know what's the percentage of the population, whether it's in the UK or the US, that is actually aware of EMFs and kind of prudently avoiding EMFs. I don't know what it is. It's probably not good. So we still have a lot of work to do.
Well, let's start there then, because I certainly think that, obviously the sort of people who listen to this podcast are a little bit more informed on their health and this sort of thing. But I would consider most of my friends as pretty well informed, pretty into their health, not as hardcore as me, but I can almost guarantee you that none of them worry about this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not in any sort of mainstream public consciousness at the moment.
They're waiting for the the credibility threshold. I think that the topic of EMFs has been ridiculed in the media. Electrosensitivity also, where you have series like Better Call Saul. God forbid, I love that series, but I hated that part where it depicts someone with electro hypersensitivity, and you know the conclusion of that entire storyline. Sorry for the spoilers. Stop there if you have never listened to it, please. But it is basically, it was all psychological.
Right.
And you know, you have phobias in life. You might have electricity phobia, and that's probably a real phenomenon in some people. But this is not what doctors are reporting that I'm talking with. We're talking about people who first get sick and then realize that a smart meter was installed near their bedroom. Then they remove the meter and then they get better. So it's not, you know, it's not the nocebo effect here. They have no idea that EMFs in many situations could impact them. So how could they have a nocebo effect for an agent that they don't know exists? So it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand the topic, and it's been considered like this. And there's also this culture in people who work with telecoms, tech. I mean, it's now a large fraction of the population works for tech because it's such a blooming industry. A lot of people that are part of this culture, it's part of a culture of no effect. So what they say is, I've been told very recently, I was doing Facebook ads for my summit and trying to advertise the summit, say, look, this is the latest scientific understanding of EMFs, and there's some concerns here. The summit is called EMF hazards. That's a hazard. And I'm kind of just saying that is controversial among these people. Yeah. And a lot of people told me, this is BS, right? And in Facebook comments, you get a lot of very angry people who are kind of quick to shoot. And someone told me, and I think he believed it, there's not a single study showing any concern at any level. Someone told me that, but this can easily be, dismissed because you go on PubMed and you type EMFs, and then you realize, no, there's hundreds, if not in the thousands of studies that have mixed results. So at best, you could say inconclusive. But someone who says there's zero studies, it's more like they're following a belief, So there's almost a religion of no effect at the moment, because I think it would be a shock for many people to realize that, no, it has an impact. And
what sort of impact?
So for example, the cell phone in the pocket. It's one of the clearest impact that in the scientific literature that we have. And the impact is not clear. And a lot of people want cookie cutter, like, okay, how many minutes of cell phone equal how much disruption of my sperm count? Well, it doesn't work exactly that way. It's like not a dose and then you get an impact like this. It is a risk level. And basically you have a very credible scientist. You're probably aware of Dr. Andrew Huberman from Stanford. He's very popular. Well, lately in the beginning of January of 2023, he reviewed the science on cell phones in pocket causing a loss of fertility and lower testosterone in men. And he found the data extremely convincing. In fact, he said that the data is more convincing than many endocrine disruptors such as BPA. He said the cell phone data is where the real data are. So this is something that he shared on Twitter and whatnot, and people were kind of starting to freak out. And I was smiling, I was grinning the entire way. I was like, okay, well, now scientists like that are actually reviewing the data and finding, wait a minute, why are we not talking about it? Because it can be easily avoided, because everyone has a phone in the pocket.
Interrupting this podcast for one moment to remind you that my podcast partners today are BiOptimizers and Magnesium Breakthrough. If you would like a shortcut to better sleep, more energy, and a calmer, more stable mood, and who wouldn't want that, then you need to make sure you're supplementing with magnesium daily, but not any magnesium, because about 75% of us are magnesium deficient, but there are actually 7 unique forms of magnesium. You need to get all of them if you want to experience its calming, health-enhancing effects. That is why I recommend Magnesium Breakthrough by BiOptimizers. And I took one probably about an hour ago. I take it twice a day sometimes, maybe once so far today, but often twice a day. It's the only organic, that's important, full spectrum magnesium supplement that includes 7 unique forms of magnesium. And, I've been partnering with BiOptimizers for a couple of years now, and they've had a couple of months off the podcast, and they are now back, and I'm very pleased about that. So you can go to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology. And even when they weren't partnering with me, I was still taking Magnesium Breakthrough. Go to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology, and you can get a discount if you use Zestology 10. And that works worldwide as well. If you're in the UK, you can go to the UK BiOptimizers site and use that same discount code, Zestology 10. So better sleep, more energy, stronger bones, healthier blood pressure. For me, it helps me sleep at night and relax and definitely get less inflamed as well. Use the code Zestology10 at the website magbreakthrough.com/Zestology. Now back to the show. That's incredible about and I suppose it's nice that someone like Huberman has weighed in to sort of support you with your citizen journalism findings.
Yes, well, definitely. And in fact, it went even more than fertility. It was an episode that he did for his inner circle. So I guess that even him, I don't think that he's not comfortable yet doing the full episode on EMFs, but he's working on one. So in my view, I wrote a blog article about this because in my view, if he does an entire episode on EMFs, it might change everything because of his level of credibility. You have maybe some people in your circle of friends that if they listen to Nick Pineault, he would say, that's pure BS. It doesn't have a degree and all the usual stuff I've been getting for 7 years. But Huberman, all of a sudden, maybe I got to listen and what the heck, right? So there's this level of credibility is extremely high in a guy like Huberman, and he's connected with all these scientists across the world and across the US. And also, he said that as a preventative measure, he reviewed the data just on what the cell phone or Bluetooth devices might do to your brain, right? So it's cancer risks, and it's also maybe risks to our cognition or other aspects. And he said, I'm not using a Bluetooth earpiece anymore. I'm not using Bluetooth headphones. I toss them away. That's what he said. So is it proof of harm? No, but it is concerning enough that we should reduce exposure, which is the opposite of what everyone is doing these days.
Yes.
People are throwing these away with wires and replacing them with Bluetooth. So it just makes you stop and pause, because if these mainstream scientists are now getting concerned enough to change their own habits, what does it mean for regulations, for example? Are our regulations sufficient enough to protect users? And this is something that scientists have been arguing for decades now, that they're completely inappropriate and unprotective.
Yeah, and certainly I think the Apple guidelines on the iPhone basically say don't hold it to your body, touching your body at any point.
Yes.
All right. Yeah.
There's a degree of separation that is used in cell phone testing or testing different devices that is completely unrealistic. But it's not only that; it is there's a set of new studies by a very, very important group, and I don't want to butcher it, so I'm going to find it while I talk. But basically, this group has been publishing studies identifying what are the pitfalls of how our current safety standards have been set. And when you read those, it's very shocking, because you realize that, originally you had a few rats and a few monkeys that were in a cage, and they exposed them to EMFs. And when they stopped eating, because they were kind of overwhelmed by EMFs, they considered, okay, these are dangerous levels. After that, they said they set a 50-fold safety factors, as they often do, and they called it a day. The data on this is so inappropriate in how if animals stop eating, it doesn't mean that this is the right threshold for cellular damage. So all of it is almost a farce when you look at how the standards were set. And they were set at a time where not even 1% of the population had a cell phone on their face. Now it's we're going towards 100% of the population that has a cell phone on their body, and they have yet to relook at the science and change it. So it's completely laughable. And now you have, I think that the new scientists that are getting and in this field and looking at the evidence, such as Huberman, find these papers and they're like, wait a minute, these standards are so inappropriate that in any other field of toxicology for any other agent, these guys would have been fired because this is completely inadequate to protect the public. But we're such in a bizarre state of affairs because the technology has been rolled out. Everyone is using it. So it means that if you change even 1% of the entire thing, it causes massive loss of revenue for telecoms. It causes massive controversy in the media, and then massive lawsuits also for consumers that might say, wait a minute, maybe that's the reason that I have fertility problems. Maybe that's the reason that I have a brain tumor. And there's already been several wins around the world for people who have, the judge has looked at the evidence and said, yeah, this is causative. Your cell phone nearly killed you and you had a brain tumor, or did kill you. And then the family has a sum of money in compensation. So it's starting. We're really there, but it's going to take so many years, but I feel like it's accelerating now. And people are kind of starting to realize the evidence is there.
Yeah. And I mean, certainly, when you look at sperm count, that is one. I think Tim Ferriss did an experiment where he measured his sperm count before and after taking his phone out of his pocket for 12 weeks and found a massive difference, because you can obviously measure sperm count and motility quite easily. It's a fascinating experiment to do. And then you've got migraines, inflammation, dizziness, but then I think, as far as I understand it, a lot of the worries, the potential worries around EMFs and health, are the sort of thing whereby if you're wearing Bluetooth headphones, or if you forget to put your Oura ring into airplane mode, or if you have your phone in your pocket, you're not going to feel anything tomorrow. It's 20, 30 years down the line where we just don't know what's going on with our bodies. And that falls under the sort of environmental toxins that have massively increased in our world over the last, I guess, 50 years.
Yes, and that's a great point. And oftentimes I even get lost in the different study endpoints. That's the thing. We're kind of limited by what we have available as much as science goes. And then who is funding that science? Because oftentimes a lot of these independent researchers are struggling with funding. If they find effects that are very inconvenient to governments and military and telecoms, who's going to pay for findings that ruin business? Like, well, it's individuals, it's philanthropy, it's nonprofit efforts, grassroots movements. So it takes a lot of time. Some of them are just asking for $50K and cannot, have $50,000 to do a study, whereas in other universities for certain topics they have millions and billions pouring in. So it is a difficult study to do, and there's a massive underfunding. But a lot of the study endpoints are very specific on cancer, for example. And yes, the cancer, there could be a lag as long as 50 years between certain exposures and then the increased risk of brain tumors later in life. So it is a known phenomenon where you could have exposures sooner in life, and then later you have the impact. That's one of the concerns of scientists that say, okay, well, the exposures that we have now, what are they going to cause in the future? So that's one of the concerns. But my primary concern is not even just about disease or not even just electrosensitivity, it's how is it impacting human performance and everyday wellness? So if you keep your phone next to, for example, your nightstand, and you reduce your sleep quality by 10%, well, over time, over 10 years, you have reduced the quality of your life. Maybe you don't feel as energized. Maybe you don't sleep as good. Maybe your hormones aren't exactly where they should be. And in the end, maybe you aged a little bit prematurely. This will impact every area of your life. So even if it's just that, I find it unacceptable personally that the public is not informed in a way that makes them take the right decisions. And that's the thing. It's really the lack of transparency, where if you purchased a device like this and it said, look, this might have health impacts, maybe people would at least be prudent about it, not fall asleep with the phone under the pillow, for example, or change how they use it, where they store it. A lot of people do that still. The studies on that are very clear. There's a lot of teenagers that store their phone under the pillow.
Let's look. We've only got a few minutes left, so let's look at some of those. If we accept that there are some areas where the science is showing some impact and some areas where the science is showing a questionable impact, what can we do? Don't sleep with your phone under the pillow. Don't wear Bluetooth headphones. What else? I use one of these, what's it called? Gadget Guard on my phone, which is supposed to send the EMFs away from my balls when it's in my pocket. Is that going to work or not?
Certain cases have their merits. I personally recommend the company Shield Your Body. Defender Shield is also excellent. So they have different products where you have cases, belt hoisters and such, or even bags, and women can have a special bag that is shielded where you won't have that exposure towards your body, especially if you carry it all day, every day. It's a matter of dosage. If you don't carry it around, you probably don't need to pay $50 to $100 for a special case. If you're a realtor like my dad and you carry it around literally 18 hours per day, then maybe you should think about it, and minimize your exposure. You talked about sleep. It's not only the cell phones, and the entire discussion could go about all the wireless sources and way beyond, but turning off the Wi-Fi at night is a good idea. A lot of people are skeptical about it. And a lot of people realize, I sleep a little bit better. And a lot of these folks, it's not just in their head because they quantify it. Oura Ring or other ways to track your sleep. You might see a difference. And even if you don't, why would you need more Wi-Fi during the night, right? If anything, you're going to save a little bit of electricity. So all these steps are just preventative measures that you can take. And also, part of the entire discussion, I think, should include light, and that's such a broad topic. Also, you did talk about blue light years and years ago, and I've continued to do so. This is why I wear yellow blue blockers when I do interviews, or especially when I try to write on my computer. I find that this is better for my eyes, but overall, just lowering the light, trying to not look at bright screens before bed. This is also a type of EMF, right? This is part of the EMF spectrum, and we're exposed to artificial EMFs that are visible in that case, bright lights that are keeping us awake and stimulated, and then we wonder why we cannot fall asleep at 11 and midnight, and we look at the clock and we don't understand what's wrong with us. Well, part of it is how much we are exposed to the invisible and the visible EMFs in our environment that are brand new and foreign to our biology. So it is something that is also important. It's all part of the mix. And in my next book, I actually wrote 2 pages, so I'm very proud of it. I have to mention it, but I'll have a follow-up to my first book that's going to include blue light and all the mitigation strategies, because I find that it's also, it should be included in the discussion as well.
Yeah. It was Andy from Bon Charge who introduced us. Right?
Yeah, Andy is just tremendous. I learned a lot from Andy. Yeah.
I'm really happy. I'm still partnering with them, and I think their products are great. And I've got one here. I'm in the bedroom recording this, and this is the light that we're using. And you know what? It's great.
I use the same back in Montreal in my condo. I use that to read just before bed. It's red, but you can see your book very clearly. I love it. Yeah,
really good. I could talk to you all day, Nick. We'll have to do a follow-up one on various things. I've got so many more points. But
sure.
What is one book that you would recommend, and one tip for living with more energy and vitality?
Oh my God, one book that I would recommend. I don't want to recommend my own book. I want to recommend a more recent one by Dr. Mercola, EMF. Very, very good book. Just type EMF Mercola. I love that book because it goes a little bit deeper into the science. It is a tremendous review of the science, and there's many other good books, but I find that, my book is practical, but lacks the depth of really Mercola and his writers team have just done such a tremendous job, especially for people that are skeptical, but that are inclined towards, science and going in deep and understanding the mechanisms. I think that this is an amazing resource.
Right. And then what about one tip for living with more energy?
I would say using blue blockers.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I use the more darker ones from Boncharge. These are also from Boncharge. There are many good companies out there, but I use the darker ones about an hour before bed, especially if I watch TV, which I do most evenings with my wife, but it just knocks me. I see the immediate difference, and then I start yawning, and I'm like, oh, and for a little while, I forgot to put them on. I don't know. I kind of lost the habit. And my sleep wasn't as good, and my sleep tracking is not lying about this. It does a tremendous difference, and just regular quality sleep, your energy levels are bound to be healthier. So it makes a big difference for me. It's such almost a stupid action step. Once you have the glasses, you just got to put them on, but it's so easy to do that. It still looks a little bit weird, but eventually everyone's going to do it, right? I hope.
I think so, yeah. Nick, honestly, so fascinating. I've got loads of action points to take away from this. Where can people find out more about you?
Sure. It's at theemfguy.com. There's my book, courses, and a newsletter and everything else in between.
I'm not signed up there, so I'm going to go and do that now.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.
That is it for this week's Zestology. Thank you to Nicolas for coming on, and thank you for listening as well. And Nicolas and I, after recording this podcast, realised that we're both going to be at the Health Optimisation Summit in June. So if you're going to be there, please come and say hello. And me and Nicolas will do a live podcast recording there as well. Might even see if we can get a few people along to listen to that. I'll have a think about that. Maybe talk to Tim. So I'll look forward to that. Nicolas will be back on in the next couple of months. Do check out Nicolas's site, and remember to check out BiOptimizers as well. They are an absolute brilliant company, and you can go to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology for the 7 unique forms of magnesium all in one supplement. You have to get the right kinds of magnesium if you want better sleep, more energy, stronger bones. I've taken one today, and I'll be taking probably another one before bedtime as well. I think it's a brilliant product, and I am so pleased to be partnering once again with BiOptimizers. It's very important to me to partner with companies only that I believe that I can actually sort of endorse. And do you know what? After recording this podcast with Nicolas, we had a discussion on how I get approached quite a lot to work with companies, and I often say no. And the world of EMFs is an area that I definitely do say no, because I get people contacting me with these products, and I don't know what they're doing. I don't understand how they work, and I don't understand how they can work. So I politely say no, thank you. But with BiOptimizers, I obviously use the product anyway, so that's great. magbreakthrough.com/Zestology. One day I'll tell you what those products are that I've rejected. But there's some crazy stuff. And you know what? I see some big influences in this space endorsing them. Yeah. What I do love is magbreakthrough.com. And if you go to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology, use the code Zestology10, and they deliver worldwide. And that code works worldwide, including on the UK site, which is bioptimizers.co.uk. That is it for this week. I hope you have a low EMF week. Next week, very exciting podcast. And if you wait 1 sec, I will tell you what it's about. Because next week, I'm going to be speaking to Dr. Dane here on unlocking the power within in terms of intuitive energies. I'm going to be saying, is that even possible? It's coming next week on Zestology.